Questions. My dear friends, life has a very interesting way of working. We plan one thing and something else happens. We expect someone to show up and they don't. Questions. We think life is going downhill and suddenly out of nowhere, God surprises us. Have you ever had that moment when you said, I didn't expect this, but wow, what a blessing? Yes. Questions. That's what I call a divine surprise. You see, God is the best event planner in the universe. He never shows you the full itinerary. He just says, trust me. Questions. I've got something amazing coming up for you. We human beings want things fast. Instant noodles, instant coffee, and even instant success. But God is not in a hurry. Questions. He's preparing something bigger than you can imagine. When you think He's delaying, He's actually developing. When you think He's ignoring you, He's actually arranging. Questions. When you think He's silent, He's actually strategizing. Remember, a delay is not a denial. Think of a stage performance. The audience sees the bright lights. Questions. But the real action happens behind the curtain. The stage hands, the props, the sound check. Similarly, God is working backstage in your life. Adjusting the lights, moving the right people. Questions. Preparing the right timing. So when things don't make sense, smile and say, God, I know you're doing something behind the scenes. Let's be honest, nobody likes pain. Questions. But remember this, before every major breakthrough, there's always a breaking point. A seed must break to grow. A caterpillar must struggle to become a butterfly. You may be crying today. Questions. But your tears are watering the soil of tomorrow's blessings. Don't curse your crisis. It might just be the delivery room of your miracle. Questions. Faith isn't believing when everything makes sense. It's believing when nothing makes sense. Sometimes God takes away what you wanted to give you what you truly needed. Questions. That's why your prayer should not just be, God, give me what I want, but rather, God, give me what's best. Let me tell you a small story. Questions. There was once a young man who lost his job and thought life was over. Every day he would walk by the same cafe, depressed and worried. One day, while waiting for a friend, questions, he bumped into a stranger there. That stranger introduced him to a business opportunity, which later became his life's biggest breakthrough. He told me later, Swamiji, questions, I didn't expect that day to change my life. And I said, Wes, that's how God works. Through ordinary days, He gives extraordinary surprises. When you're ready, God will release it. Questions. When you're restless, He'll remind you. Patience, my child. It's like Wi-Fi. If your device isn't ready to receive the connection, no matter how strong the signal is, questions, you'll remain offline. So get your heart, your character, and your mindset ready for the blessings that are on the way. Words are powerful. Questions. Stop saying nothing is working out. Start saying something amazing is on its way. Because faith is not just a feeling, it's a language. When you speak hope, you invite heaven to act. Questions. So every morning, look in the mirror and say, God will surprise me very soon. And it will be beautiful. Sometimes you're doing everything right. Working hard, being kind. Questions. Staying honest. And nothing seems to change. But remember, God is keeping the receipts. He sees every effort, every sacrifice, every silent tear. And when the right moment comes, questions, He will surprise you in ways that make you forget every sleepless night you ever had. When your blessing finally arrives, and it won't just be for you. Questions. It will be to inspire others who are still waiting for theirs. Your story will say, if God can do it for me, He can do it for you. So, my dear friends, if today your life feels uncertain, questions, your prayers seem unanswered, or your dreams look delayed, hold on. Because sometimes God makes you wait not to punish you, but to position you. You are not forgotten. You are being prepared. Questions. And when the time is right, the doors will open, the right people will appear, and the blessings will flow so fast, you'll say, questions. My friends, one of the hardest lessons in life is learning to wait. We live in a world that glorifies speed, fast food, internet, fast success. We want everything now. Questions. If the Wi-Fi buffers for 3 seconds, we act like the universe is ending. If someone doesn't reply to our message in 10 minutes, we start doubting our worth. Isn't it true? Questions. We have become addicted to instant results, but God's plans do not operate on our human deadlines. His timing is divine, not digital. Sometimes we look up and say, God, questions, why are you taking so long? And he smiles as if saying, my dear child, questions, I'm not denying you, I'm developing you. What looks like a delay is often God preparing you for what you asked for. Because if he gives it too early, you might not be ready to handle it. Questions. Let me give you an example. Imagine a farmer planting a mango seed. He waters it every day, protects it from pests, gives it sunlight. But still, for months nothing seems to happen. Questions. The seed is underground, invisible. A child might look at it and say, Uncle, the seed isn't growing, it's useless. But the farmer smiles. Questions. Knowing that something powerful is happening beneath the surface. The roots are forming, the foundation is growing strong. The fruit will come, but not yet. Questions. The fruit cannot appear before the roots are ready. Similarly, when you are praying, working hard, staying honest, and yet not seeing results, don't assume that nothing is happening. Questions. Your roots are growing deep. God is strengthening your character, your patience, your resilience, because he knows a blessing without preparation can become a burden. Let's take a modern example. Questions. Imagine a young woman named Anjali. She wanted a job in a top company. She applied, gave interviews, prayed, worked hard, but every time she thought, this is it, she received a rejection email. She felt broken, confused, and said, God, I did everything right. Why not me? Months later, questions. She applied for another position at a different company. She got selected. The salary was higher, the environment was healthier. Questions. And the opportunities were far greater than the first company she had desperately wanted. Looking back, she said, if I had gotten that earlier job, I would have settled for less. Questions. God was saving me for something better. That's divine timing. When something doesn't happen according to your schedule, don't panic. It might be protection in disguise. Questions. Think of a small child who sees his father making coffee. The kettle is on the stove, water is boiling and steam is rising. The child says, Papa, can I have it now? The father replies, no. Questions, it's too hot. But the child insists, please, I want it now. If the father gave it immediately, the child would burn his tongue. The father's delay isn't denial, it's love. Questions. In the same way, when God holds something back, it's not because he wants to hurt you. It's because he loves you too much to give it before the time is right. You see, timing is everything. Questions. Even a beautiful flower doesn't bloom in winter. You can't rush spring, you can only prepare for it. The sun rises at its appointed time. Not a second early, not a second late. Questions. And in the same way, your blessing, your miracle, your success, it has an appointed time too. We often think, if I don't get this now, I'll miss my chance. But my dear friends, questions. What's meant for you will never miss you, and what misses you was never meant for you. The universe doesn't operate on luck. It moves on divine orchestration. Every delay has a reason. Questions. And every reason hides a lesson. Let me tell you something personal. Once a young man met me after a session and said, Gaur Gopal does G. I prayed for a promotion for 2 years. It never came. Questions. I felt like God ignored me. Then last year my company shut down due to financial losses. Everyone lost their jobs because I wasn't promoted. I had less responsibility. Questions. So I was free to move to another company quickly. Within months, I got a better job with double the pay. If I had been promoted earlier, questions, I would have been stuck and lost everything. I looked at him and said, God didn't ignore you. He protected you. That's the magic of divine timing. When doors close, questions, don't bang on them in frustration. Step back, breathe, and remember, maybe that door wasn't leading you to your destiny. Sometimes God closes doors because He knows you deserve a palace. Questions. Ever a prison no you receive today is a setup for a bigger yes tomorrow. Every delay is preparation for divine delivery. You may not understand it now, questions, but one day you look back and say, now I see why that didn't work out. Thank you, God. And so, what can we do while waiting for God's timing? We can grow in gratitude. Questions. Instead of complaining, start thanking Him for what's already working in your life. Because gratitude keeps your heart soft and your faith strong. We can also keep improving ourselves. Questions. The waiting period is not wasted time, it's preparation time. If you are waiting for the right partner, become the right person. If you are waiting for the right opportunity, sharpen your skills. Questions. If you are waiting for God to open a door, build the character that can walk through it. Because when the time comes, and it will, you'll be ready. So, the next time you feel like life is slow, questions. Remember this truth, God's clock never runs late. You may not be able to see the hands of His watch, but it's always ticking perfectly. Trust His timing, questions, because He's not just preparing the blessing for you. He's preparing you for the blessing. The universe is not punishing you. God has not forgotten you. He's simply saying, my child, questions, hold on. I'm building something bigger than you asked for. And one day, when everything falls into place, when your tears turn into laughter, and your waiting becomes worth it, questions, you'll realize the delay was never a denial. It was divine design. God's timing was perfect all along. Questions. My dear friends, one of the most beautiful and sometimes the most frustrating truths of life is this: even when you can't see God working, He is still working. Questions. Just because you can't feel Him doesn't mean He's absent. Just because you can't hear Him doesn't mean He's silent. God often works behind the scenes, quietly, strategically, questions, and perfectly, arranging things in ways our human minds can't yet comprehend. Imagine going to a theater to watch a grand play. The audience sees the beautiful costumes, the lights, questions, the actors performing their roles. Everything looks magical, but what the audience doesn't see is the backstage chaos. The stagehands moving props, the lighting crew adjusting spotlights, questions, the director whispering instructions. Without all of that unseen work, the performance on stage would collapse. Life is exactly like that play. Questions. What we see on the stage of our lives, the visible events, opportunities, and challenges, is only half the story. Behind the curtain, God is orchestrating every scene, moving people, questions, shifting circumstances, and aligning everything for your greater good. Sometimes we look around and say, God, where are you? Questions. Why aren't you doing anything? But if we could peek behind that curtain, we would see that He's moving things in your favor that you can't even imagine yet. Questions. He's not inactive, He's invisible, and that's very different. Let me share a simple story. A young man named Rahul was desperately looking for a job. He had all the qualifications, questions, he had the passion, but every interview ended with disappointment. Months went by, and he started to lose hope. He would pray every night saying, "Oh God, are you even listening?" Questions. I'm doing everything I can. What Rahul didn't know was that the manager who would eventually hire him hadn't even joined the company yet. That manager was in another city, questions, completing a project that would end in a few months. When the right time came, that manager moved to the new company met Rahul questions and offered him a position far better than what he had originally applied for. Now, when Rahul looks back, he smiles and says, "While I was worrying questions, God was working." That's how God operates. Quietly behind the curtain, setting up divine appointments. You may not see it, but He's preparing people to cross your path. Questions. Preparing opportunities that are not yet visible. Preparing blessings that are still under construction. We humans want to see everything clearly. We want to know the plan, the timeline, the reason. Questions. But sometimes if God showed us everything at once, we wouldn't have faith. We would just have facts. And faith only grows in the dark. Think of a child in school. Questions. The teacher gives the students a test. During the test, the classroom is silent. The teacher doesn't talk. But that silence doesn't mean the teacher has left. Questions. The teacher is still there, watching, observing, ensuring every student gets what they've prepared for. Similarly, when you feel that heaven is silent, remember this. Questions. The teacher is still in the room. God hasn't left your life. He's simply observing how you handle this season. Because He's preparing your promotion behind the scenes. Questions. Let's take another real life example. There was a woman named Meena who used to commute by train every day. One evening, she missed her train by just 2 minutes. Questions. She was frustrated. She had an important meeting and missing that train meant she would be late. She sat on the bench, angry, disappointed, thinking, "Gaur, questions. Why would you let this happen?" Later that evening, she learned that the train she missed had met with a serious accident. That small delay saved her life. Questions. What she thought was bad luck was actually divine protection. God was working behind the scenes, saving her from something she didn't even know was coming. So many times, questions. We only see the closed doors, the rejections, the delays. But we don't see what God protected us from. We don't see the unseen dangers, the wrong turns, the toxic paths. Questions. While we're busy complaining, God is busy controlling what could have destroyed us. It's like watching a painter create a masterpiece. At first, questions. All you see are random strokes and splashes of color. You might think, what is he doing? This doesn't make sense. But when the painting is finished, questions, you suddenly see the full picture. Every stroke had a purpose, every shade had a meaning. In the same way, every event in your life, the success, the struggle, the delay, questions, the heartbreak is a brushstroke on the canvas of your destiny. God is the painter. He sees the whole picture while we only see one corner. Sometimes you meet someone unexpectedly, questions, and that person becomes a blessing in your life. Sometimes you lose something only to find out later that it wasn't good for you. Sometimes a door closes, questions, and months later you realize that God closed it because He had something much better planned. You see, God is not a magician. He's a master planner, and His plans are always for your good. Questions, even when they don't feel good in the moment. So if you are in a season where you can't see how things will work out, remind yourself, questions. Just because I can't see it doesn't mean it's not happening. Behind every silence, God is speaking. Behind every delay, He's designing. Behind every loss, questions, He's leading you to something greater. When you don't see His hand, trust His heart, because His heart is always for you. You may not understand the path now, but one day when you look back, questions, everything will make sense. When the curtain finally opens and the scene changes, you'll realize that all along, the stage was being prepared for you. Every hidden moment, every invisible effort, questions, every silent prayer, God heard it, saw it, and worked through it. So today, if you feel forgotten or stuck, smile and whisper to yourself, questions, my God is working behind the scenes. Because even when it looks like nothing is happening, heaven is busy writing your next chapter. And it's going to be beautiful. Questions. My dear friends, there's a universal truth that many of us learn the hard way. Before every breakthrough, there is always a breakdown. Before every sunrise, there is always darkness. Questions. Before every joy, there is always a journey through pain. Pain, as uncomfortable as it is, often becomes the doorway to our greatest blessings. Nobody likes pain. Questions. We all want the success without the struggle, the reward without the waiting, and the strength without the stretching. But that's not how life works. Questions. Even the most beautiful creations of nature go through discomfort before they bloom. The diamond you admire had to face tremendous pressure. The butterfly you adore once struggled inside a cocoon. Questions. The seed you plant must break apart before it grows into a tree. Every form of beauty and success begins with pain. Let's take a simple example. Imagine a mother giving birth. For 9 long months. Questions. She carries the baby, feeling the discomfort, the weight, the nausea, the sleepless nights. And then comes the most painful moment, labor. It's called labor for a reason. Questions. But after all that pain, there's a cry. The cry of new life, the cry of joy. In that moment, the pain doesn't matter anymore. Why? Because the purpose of the pain was revealed. In the same way, questions. When you go through emotional, financial, or spiritual pain, remember, you are not being punished, you are being prepared. Questions. God allows you to feel pressured because He's birthing something new inside you. Pain refines you. It doesn't define you. It refines you. Think about gold. Raw gold looks like a dull, questions, dirty stone. To become pure and shiny, it must go through fire. It melts, it's reshaped, it's refined. The fire doesn't destroy it, it purifies it. In life, your challenges are like that fire. Questions. The failures, betrayals, and disappointments you face aren't meant to burn you. They're meant to build you. Let me tell you a story. Questions. There was a young man named Samir who dreamed of starting his own business. He worked hard, saved money, and launched his company. But within a year, it failed miserably. He lost everything. Money, questions, confidence, and even the support of some friends who laughed behind his back. He was heartbroken. In those moments, he questioned God. Why me? Questions. Why did you let this happen when I had good intentions? But instead of giving up, he decided to learn from the failure. He studied what went wrong, worked on his weaknesses, questions, and developed better strategies. 2 years later, he tried again. This time, his business took off and became one of the most successful ventures in his town. When he looked back, he said, questions, if I hadn't faced that failure, I would have never learned what true success needs. You see, the pain he experienced wasn't a dead end, it was a detour, a divine redirection. Questions. God used the pain to make him stronger, wiser, and more humble. Often, we pray for strength, but we don't realize that strength only grows through struggle. Questions. A muscle grows only when it is stretched and torn during exercise. Similarly, your faith, patience, and resilience grow when life stretches you beyond your comfort zone. Questions. Maybe today you are facing pain in some area of your life. A broken relationship, a financial loss, a health issue, or a dream that seems shattered. It hurts, I know. But remember this, questions. Sometimes God allows you to hit rock bottom not to destroy you, but so that you'll discover He is the rock at the bottom. When everything else fails, that's when faith becomes real. Questions. You begin to realize that your own strength is limited, but divine strength is limitless. Pain pushes you to that realization. Questions. There's a powerful story about a little boy who found a butterfly struggling to emerge from its cocoon. The boy felt sorry for it, so he decided to help. Questions. He carefully tore the cocoon open to set the butterfly free. But to his surprise, the butterfly's wings were weak, and it couldn't fly. Questions. What the boy didn't know was that the struggle of pushing through the cocoon was necessary for the butterfly's wings to strengthen. By trying to remove the struggle, He removed the strength. Questions. My friends, sometimes the pain you want to escape is the very thing that's giving you wings. God doesn't remove every obstacle because He knows that without pressure, there's no progress. Questions. Without struggle, there's no strength. Even in your darkest times, God is not absent. Just as gold is purified in fire, your soul is purified through challenges. Questions. Every tear you shed is watering the soil for your next victory. Every heartbreak is hollowing your heart to make room for greater love. Every failure is shaping your wisdom for future success. Questions. When life hurts, it's easy to think God has forgotten me. But what if at that very moment God is closer than ever, watching you grow, evolve, and mature through the process? Sometimes, questions. His greatest miracles come wrapped in mystery. Think of a rainy day. When it's pouring and the sky is gray, we often complain and wish for sunshine. But without the rain, there would be no growth. Questions. No greenery, no life. The rain may be unpleasant, but it's necessary. And in the same way, the pain in your life is what makes your soul fertile for growth. Questions. So the next time you go through a painful experience, instead of asking, why me? Try asking, what is this pain trying to teach me? You'll discover that every wound carries wisdom. Questions. Every challenge carries change, and every trial carries transformation. One day when the storm has passed and your heart begins to heal, questions, you'll look back and realize that what you thought was breaking you was actually building you. The pain that once made you cry will become the reason you smile. Questions. And when that divine surprise finally arrives, when the door opens, when the dream comes true, when the burden turns into a blessing, you'll understand that the pain was never pointless. Questions. It was the pathway to your purpose. So hold on, my friends. Don't give up in the middle of your pain. Because the same God who allowed the struggle is the same God who will bring the surprise. Questions. And when it happens, you'll say with tears of gratitude, it was worth every moment. Questions. My dear friends, trust is one of the most beautiful and yet the most difficult virtues to practice. We say we trust God. Questions. But the real test of that trust comes when life stops making sense, when our plans fall apart, when our prayers seem unanswered, when the people we counted on walk away. Questions. And we're left standing in silence asking, why God? Trust is easy when everything is going right. When the bank balance is full, relationships are smooth, health is strong. Questions. And doors are opening, we joyfully say, a God is good. But what about when nothing seems to work? When the answers don't come and all you see are closed doors? Questions. That's when faith moves from theory to reality. Trusting God in the light is simple, trusting Him in the dark. That's where true faith is born. Let me tell you a small story. Questions. There was a farmer who had one horse. One day the horse ran away. The villagers came to him and said, "Oh no, what bad luck." The farmer smiled and said, "Maybe." A few days later, questions. The horse returned and brought along 3 wild horses with it. The villagers exclaimed, "What great luck." The farmer again said, "Maybe." The next day, questions. His son to try to train one of the wild horses, but he fell and broke his leg. The villagers cried, "Such bad luck." The farmer said, "Maybe." A week later, questions. Soldiers came to the village to recruit all able-bodied young men for war. Because his son had a broken leg, he was spared. The villagers said, "What a blessing." The farmer smiled and said, questions. Maybe. The moral of the story: you never know what's truly good or bad in the moment. What looks like a setback might be a setup. What feels like rejection might actually be redirection. Questions. That's why trust is so essential. Because we see only a small fragment of life, but God sees the full picture. Imagine you're driving through fog. Questions. You can't see the whole road, only a few meters ahead. But you trust that if you keep moving carefully, the road will unfold as you go. Life works the same way. Questions. God doesn't show us the entire journey because if He did, we'd either get overwhelmed or run away. He reveals just enough to keep us moving forward one step at a time. Questions. There was once a young woman named Priya who dreamed of becoming a singer. She gave auditions, worked hard, and even got a few small opportunities. But just when she was about to sign a major deal, questions. The company cancelled the project. She was heartbroken. For months she cried and questioned, God, why would you let this happen when I was so close? A year later, questions. She received an unexpected call from a producer who had heard her voice on social media. He invited her to record for a film soundtrack. That song became a massive hit and her career took off. Questions. When she looked back, she said, if that first project had worked out, I would have been tied to a company that didn't value me. Questions. What I thought was a loss was actually protection. Our trust means believing that God knows what you don't. It means resting in the truth that His no is not rejection but redirection. Questions. When He withholds something, it's not because He's cruel. It's because He sees ahead and knows what would harm you or limit you. Questions. Think of a parent holding their child's hand while crossing a busy street. The child might tug and cry, wanting to run to the colorful ice cream shop on the other side. Questions. But the parent holds tight and says, not yet. The child feels frustrated and thinks, my parent is so mean. But the parent knows that letting go in that moment could lead to danger. Questions. Similarly, when God says, not yet, it's not punishment, it's protection. Sometimes life takes you through paths you never wanted to walk. You lose a job, a friend, or a dream. Questions. You stand there wondering, what did I do wrong? But trust tells you to breathe and whisper, God, I don't understand this, but I believe you do. Because while you see confusion, questions, God sees construction. He's building something beautiful in the background that your current eyes can't yet recognize. There's an old saying, faith is not about believing God can. Questions. It's about believing He will. And that even if He doesn't, you'll still trust Him. Real trust is not conditional. It's not, I'll trust you as long as you do what I want. It's questions. I'll trust you even if you don't. Because His ways are higher than ours and His wisdom is beyond what we can comprehend. Let me give you a relatable example. Imagine baking a cake. Questions. When the batter is still raw, it tastes terrible. If someone walked into the kitchen at that point, they'd think the recipe was a disaster. But once the batter goes through the heat of the oven, questions, it transforms into something sweet and delightful. Likewise, when your life feels like it's stuck in the baking stage, don't panic. You're not finished yet. Questions. God is still cooking something delicious for your destiny. Trust is not passive. It doesn't mean doing nothing. It means doing your part, praying, working. Questions. Staying honest and leaving the results to God. It's knowing that even when you don't get what you want, you'll still get what you need. Questions. There's a peace that comes when you stop fighting for control and start flowing with divine direction. You begin to say, God, I may not see it now, but I know you are good. Questions. I may not understand it today, but one day I'll look back and see how perfectly you planned everything. So if you're in a season where life feels uncertain and confusing, don't lose heart. Questions. Don't rush the process. God's silence is not His absence. His delay is not His denial. Keep walking in faith because one day the puzzle pieces will fit together. Questions. And when that day comes, when everything suddenly makes sense, you'll smile through tears and say, no, I understand. Every closed door, every tear, questions, every detour, it all had a purpose. Until then, keep trusting, even when you don't understand. Because faith doesn't demand answers, it rests in assurance. And God questions, who sees the end from the beginning, is writing a story in your life that will make you realize His plan was better all along. Questions. My dear friends, if there's one thing about God that continues to amaze me, it's this. He loves surprises. He doesn't always announce His blessings with a drum roll. Questions. He doesn't always send a calendar invite saying, "Get ready, I'm going to bless you tomorrow at 4 p.m." No. Questions. He often works in ways that catch us completely off guard. Just when we think everything is falling apart, suddenly something beautiful happens. That's the nature of our divine Creator. Questions. He's not only a God of order and wisdom, He's also the God of delightful surprises. Think about it, how boring life would be if we knew everything that was going to happen. Questions. God often hides His greatest gifts behind the curtains of uncertainty, because if He showed you the entire script, you wouldn't need faith anymore. You'd simply act it out mechanically. Questions. But God wants you to walk with trust, not predictability. He wants you to wake up each morning with a heart full of hope, whispering, "I don't know what today holds." Questions. But I know who holds today. Let me share a story that beautifully captures this idea. There was a man named Arjun who had lost his job unexpectedly. He had bills to pay, a family to care for, questions, and no idea what to do next. Days turned into weeks and his confidence began to fade. He kept praying, "God, please, just give me a sign. Show me you haven't forgotten me." One morning, questions. Feeling restless, he decided to go out for a walk. He stopped at a small tea stall he had never noticed before. The owner struck up a conversation, and they began talking about life, business, questions, and purpose. To Arjun's surprise, the tea vendor turned out to be an old friend's cousin who happened to know a company looking for someone with Arjun's exact skill set. Within 2 weeks, questions, Arjun had a new job, one that paid better and gave him more peace of mind than his previous one. When he looked back, he said, "That day, I wasn't looking for a job. I was just buying tea." Questions. But God was setting up my miracle through a cup of chai. That's how divine surprises work. God doesn't always come through grand gestures. Sometimes, questions, He hides in small moments, a conversation, a delay, a coincidence that isn't really a coincidence. What you think is random is often divinely arranged. If you look at your own life, questions, you'll realize that some of the best things that ever happened to you weren't planned by you. Maybe it was meeting your life partner unexpectedly, finding your passion by accident, questions, or getting an opportunity you never even applied for. Those are God's surprises, His gentle reminders that He's been writing your story all along. There's a beautiful saying, questions, while you're worrying about what's next, God is already working on what's next. Isn't that comforting? He doesn't operate on your visible timeline. Questions. He works in secret and reveals His plan at the perfect moment. Sometimes the surprise comes wrapped in a situation that looks like a setback. Remember the story of Joseph in the Bible. Questions. His brothers sold him into slavery, which seemed like a tragedy, but that painful event became the pathway to his destiny. Years later, questions, he became the governor of Egypt, a position he could never have reached without that painful detour. What looked like betrayal was actually preparation. That's how God's surprises work. Questions. They're not always wrapped in shiny paper. Sometimes they come disguised as disappointment. But when the wrapping is removed, the blessing is breathtaking. Let's take a modern day example. Questions. A woman named Kavita was engaged to be married. A month before her wedding, her fiancé suddenly called it off. She was devastated. Her dreams were shattered, and she felt her world collapsing. Questions. For months, she questioned God. Why would you let this happen? Why humiliate me like this? 2 years later, she met a man through a volunteer project. He was kind, understanding, questions, and shared her values. They eventually got married, and she realized that the person she once cried over wasn't meant to stay in her life. If that first relationship had worked, she said, questions, I would have settled for less than I deserved. God's surprise came after my heartbreak, and it was worth every tear. My friends, questions. Sometimes your disappointment is just a divine delay, a pause before the surprise. When something doesn't go as you planned, don't assume it's the end. It might just be God saying, wait, questions. I have something better. But have you ever noticed how children love surprises? When you tell a child, close your eyes, questions. I have something for you. They giggle with excitement and wait with pure trust. That's how God wants us to be. To trust Him like children, knowing that His surprises are always good. Questions. Even if they don't come in the way we expect, you may be going through a season right now where you feel unseen, unheard, or forgotten. Questions. But remember, just because you can't see the miracle doesn't mean it isn't forming. God is setting the stage, arranging the people, and preparing the moment. When it finally happens, questions, it will leave you speechless. One day, when you least expect it, the phone will ring, the email will arrive, or the door will open. And you'll smile through tears and say, God, questions. You surprise me. The truth is, God delights in exceeding your expectations. The same God who turned water into wine can turn your worry into wonder. Questions. The same God who opened the Red Sea can open doors no man can shut. The same God who fed thousands with a few loaves and fishes can multiply your small beginnings into something extraordinary. Questions. So don't lose heart if life feels quiet right now. Don't assume that silence means nothing's happening. Heaven often whispers before it shouts. Questions. The seed grows underground before it breaks through the soil. You may not see the surprise yet, but it's coming, and when it comes, it'll arrive in such a beautiful, questions, unexpected way that you'll know it could only be God. Until then, keep your faith alive. Keep your heart open. Keep expecting good things. Questions. Because the God who painted the sunrise without asking your permission is the same God who's preparing a new dawn in your life. One that will surprise you in the most miraculous way. One morning, questions. When you wake up, everything will make sense. You'll realize that all those moments of waiting, crying, and doubting were just the prelude to something divine. Questions. And you whisper with a grateful heart, indeed, my God is full of surprises.